to be focusing, again, like we did yesterday, on 2 other issues, which are reproductive justice, health and freedom, and then also getting a little bit into climate, which is a conversation that is always interesting to follow on the internet. Also just wanted to say happy Mother's Day to those that are celebrating, and then also sending positive vibes and solidarity for folks that might be feeling a little bit of loss or grief today as well. So I'm wishing you all strength and happiness and positivity today. So just to get us acclimated today, I'm going to unmute you, Samantha, to introduce Samantha, who is the head of our youth engagement over at Women's March and works with all of our wonderful young people. You can say hi, Samantha.
Hi. Hi, happy to be here with you all today.
Thank you, Samantha. So Samantha's going to be assisting with sort of moving all the slides around and ensuring that everyone's taken care of. And Prachi says, oh my God, hi, Sam, in the chat. So I think that you all might know each other.
Prachi, oh my goodness.
Wonderful. Worlds collide. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to move us to the next slide, Sam. Excellent. So today, just to run us through the schedule, we are going to get into Slack a little bit. I am very impressed and excited about so many folks that that have, you know, already accepted the invites, gotten on, and are already being engaged. So I'm excited to continue that conversation, and just know if you're DMing me right now on Slack, I probably will not be able to respond until this is over, just because I want to stay focused on the presentation, but I will be able to respond to everything after this. So I'm really grateful that you're all on. And I also know that there are folks that are going to be hopping on and off, but that's okay for today. As you know, everything's being recorded, so that does mean that if you miss a session or two, you can always get back on. So I'm going to, after Slack, we're going to get into climate justice. We're going to have Atiana, who we work with on a lot of our gender equity and climate work, who's going to be presenting on that issue. We're going to take a break from 1:15 to 1:30, and then we're going to hear from Ellie Langford, who is the Director of Research at NARAL Pro-Choice, and has actually been doing a lot of work today and this entire week because of a lot of the Supreme Court movement on restriction to access for birth control. And then Rachel Carmona from the Women's March is going to run us through just another refresher on how to engage online. So really, that's a space for us to ask questions, to think through, hey, you know, is this somebody who's a positive ally? Is it somebody who's a troll? How do we, you know, how do we spot one from the other? And then we'll be moving into the debrief and Q&A section. So that's the schedule for today. And I'm going to pause there and see if anybody has any questions. Great point, Jessica. So between 3:30 and 4:30, we're actually going to have you all break and actually practice. I should have put that in the agenda, but you'll see it as a slide. So we actually have a few threads and hashtags that some of our co-facilitators have pulled together, focusing on the conversations around the Supreme Court, because there's a lot of movement and propaganda around that going on online. So I will be sharing those links with you right at 3:30, and at that point you can practice, and then at 4:30 you'll come back. And for folks that are feeling brave or feel as though they had interactions that they want to share, you'll be able to share them out there. And then we can end with some questions and answers. Another question that I see is, do we go ahead and accept the Slack invite? Yes. Anybody that received the Slack invite in your inbox, that's because you attended the training yesterday, and you submitted the volunteer agreement. So you can go ahead and accept that Slack invite and you can get onboarded onto the channel. Other questions, friends? I'll give it 30 more seconds. Anything that's on your mind. And for folks that didn't get the Slack invite but did submit the agreement this morning, I stopped sending the Slack invites at around 10:15, 10:30, just so I could prepare for this presentation. So I'll be able to send them again once I'm off of this. So don't feel like I missed out. Teddy, I will refresh and check if that missed you somehow, and I'll follow up with you separately, okay? Question from Catherine. Yes, absolutely. So the way I too use the Digital Defenders Slack workspace in addition to my other work, and I will say it's a little bit more annoying, and I know that Samantha, you also pointed that out in the Slack channel. It is a little bit more cumbersome to set up, but you use the invite the same way. If you have any problems like adding a workspace to your Slack, just shoot me a message separately and we can troubleshoot together. And I also see a question from Ann Swinderman. Are there specific news sources that don't have the BS that are good to follow? I usually follow Washington Post and ABC. Yeah, and we're actually going to have, from the 2:15 to 3:30 section, we're going to have a specific conversation on news sources. So hang tight till then. And in a second, I'll just be pointing you to a resource bank as well that we can look at together, okay? All right, let's move to the next slide. Great. So before I go into the Slack tutorial, I know that yesterday we had some issues clicking and opening links on the chat, which is the perpetual issue with Zoom, I think. So I just wanted to let you know that these are 3 bit.lys or short links that you can access that have a lot of the resources that we went over yesterday, a lot of the links and articles that you saw referenced in the presentations. I think almost everything is there except for ones that were generated in the chat because I haven't uploaded those yet. So the first one is hashtags. So this is some of the information that was shared yesterday, in addition to what you saw just over the chat box as well. And those links all exist on a locked website. I just want to keep our communication a little streamlined so you're not getting a million emails. If you go on Slack, and I'll show this to you in a second, you can actually access our website that has all of these documents in it. So I will take you there in a second, okay? So the hashtags, you can just type this into your browser and this will show you all of them split up by issue. We also have hashtags to follow that I will keep populating as other issues come up. So for instance, as we're seeing more conversations emerge around COVID and some of that misinformation, you will see that reflected in the document as well. The second one is links and articles. It's a living document, and that's where I keep updating them with sources such as the ones that were mentioned yesterday, as well as some of the foundational documents that you received. And I know some folks had difficulty accessing them, so you can go into that. And again, this is all on Slack as well as on the website. So I would urge you to get on Slack so you can turn to the website right away. So you have one home base. And then the volunteer agreement, I think I'm only missing 6 at this point. So kudos to everyone for getting that done right away. I really, really appreciate it because that way we can all get onboarded to Slack right away and begin work. And great question from Gina. If you come across other articles or research papers that are helpful, where do we send them for vetting and inclusion? Gina, you can always email them, and I'm going to put put my email address in here. I'm usually a lot more responsive. I'm just not today or yesterday because of this, being focused on the training. But come Monday, that's something I monitor regularly. So Digital Defenders at womensmarch.com is one place. And then Gina, I know you're already on Slack. That's another place where you can also pop in articles and resources anytime you want. Great. All right, so I am going to actually share my screen and take you all into Slack for a second. And when I'm sharing my screen, I won't be able to see the chat quite as clearly, so please bear with me. But I just wanted to give you all a sense of what we are working with. So just a second. All right. My Slack is also looking a little wild because there's so many people on it right now. Wow. All right, so this is our Digital Defenders workspace. Some of you are already on it, and if you see my DMs on the side, I get a notification every time somebody accepts an invite. So it seems like a lot of folks are already on, and that's wonderful. So the things that you see here, as you can see, I have another workspace as well. I have the Women's March staff workspace. So just wanted to point out that if you are someone that is going to be on multiple workspaces, I would recommend installing a desktop version of Slack. I have it on my phone as well, but it makes it a little bit easier to use, and it's right next to my my mailbox. So it's just a little bit more intuitive and sort of part of my everyday routine. So when you're in this channel or in this workspace, you'll see a few different things. So I just want to walk you through them. So this is our main, as you can see, there's a lot of conversation here. This is the Digital Defenders sort of like general conversation where we talk about admin needs, where we sort of upkeep with email, social media handles. And as you can see, there's Digital Defenders that were trained prior to May that are on this as well. And as you can see, I actually have, when you see this little pin on the top, that means that I've pinned information. So if you click on this pin, you'll actually see the username and login for a website that is solely for your purpose. So this is the womensmarch.com/digital defenders resources. When you pull up this website, you'll be able to put in a password. So when you put in that password, you'll have access to a website that contains videos from the last round and will be updated with the May training video recordings as well, and also has the documents that I just went over with you. So the hashtags as well as the resource bank that also has information on fact checking at the bottom. So I would say stay tuned, get comfortable with that website, but all the information you should need and all documents will live on Slack, just so that you're not getting an abundance of emails from me, or they're going to your spam or getting lost. So when you're on here, you see that this is sort of like our home base central area. I'm seeing a lot of wonderful people already sort of chime in and say hi and good morning as you're getting acclimated. And then we have different channels. The purpose of channels is really 4 topics, right? So like at the top, you'll see this channel will be used to share online exchanges pertaining to climate. So that's where if you see, for instance, just to bring up an example, recently Atiana, who you'll be hearing from later, she wanted to share the fact that under COVID, we're actually seeing a lot of EPA rollbacks and a lot of weakening of previously semi-strong regulations that had been put into place. So this is where she shared some articles just to let folks know, hey, this is something that's happening right now. You might see these conversations emerging around climate, might be something for you to follow on digital platforms and see if there's ways for you to engage or correct the record. In addition, this is our COVID channel. So we actually started this in March because we were beginning to have more conversations around, similar to what we started discussing yesterday, seeing how the pandemic is being spoken about, seeing what viral videos are being pushed by the administration and painted as true, that we can begin to demystify and debunk. So this is a place where you can keep up with all things COVID, where if you see, for instance, something that that sticks to you, that you want to share with folks or get them to engage in, you can bring that up on this channel. General is something that is automatic. So that is a channel that's created with Slack. Every Slack workspace has a general channel. Some folks use this, some folks don't. I would say that I would use Digital Defender Cohort more and not really rely on the general channel, because it is a little bit amorphous and a little bit more vague. Immigration, this one is currently empty because we haven't engaged on this topic recently. So as we're beginning to talk about immigrant rights and immigration, we can bring that into the channel. Intersectionality, this is really if you have questions about an intersectional approach or framework, you can bring that up here, or share other videos or articles that help deepen your own feminist framework. Random, this is where you can share self-care posts. This is where you can share anything around, we had a long conversation around Zoom bombing, which was something that was taking place pretty frequently before Zoom decided to put some restrictions in place. So this is where we started having some conversations around Zoom, also where you can practice making GIFs or GIFs, whichever of the pronunciations you choose, and also just be nice to each other and share fun comments. And this is repro. So this is a place where, for instance, today when we're practicing and we're debriefing, you are able to have some conversations with each other and share tips and tricks. So I'm gonna send just like a sample note to someone, and I am going to choose Christina for that. So this is also where you can DM folks. So you are allowed to use this however you wish. So if you want to have conversations, if you want to have a prolonged conversation with someone, you can do that via DM. You can also add multiple people to a DM, and I will sample that here. Direct messages, and I'm going to do Christina, and I'm also going to do Evan. And that way you can also have a group chat. So this way, if you especially call in a friend to help you with something, a Slack sort of DM is a great way to get some feedback from each other and also just communicate as a group. The other sort of important point is that you can also think through how you want to be setting your own notifications. So before I go into that, you can also search Digital Defender. So it operates just like, just like any other search function. So you can also just put in, I'm looking for a specific thread, I'm looking for a specific word. You can put that in there. And then again, you can also use your DMs to share files with each other. So if there's a screenshot of something that you want to share, you can do that using Slack as well. So you can also share files. We haven't gotten that deep into using Slack in that fashion, just because it is something that, folks are volunteering their time to do, but it's up to you and how you want to use it and how you want to integrate it into your life. And then every Slack is also going to have preferences. So you can choose how you want to be notified. So for me, I get notified with all new messages. I get notified when someone responds to me on a thread. And you can also set keywords. I don't have any on here because I, monitor this workspace pretty religiously. But you can add a keyword. So for instance, if you're having a conversation with someone around a piece of legislation that you want folks to know about in Tennessee, you can set a keyword so that anytime someone mentions Tennessee, you'll get a notification. You can also disable notifications when you're sleeping. So if you, like me, enjoy your sleep, I have 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. on, which is generally how long I try to sleep. So you can go ahead and do that as well. And that means you won't get, a pop-up notification on your phone, and you won't necessarily hear any audio notification either. And then you can also, of course, mute your sounds. You can play a sound. It really operates just like any other, communication service. So I am going to stop my share because I know there are a few different questions. So just let me go from the top. All right. So Catherine, I will send you another invite so you get it on the email that you prefer. And then Christine also mentions you can, Christine is talking Catherine through the menu on the cell phone so that you can drop the menu down. And Rosemary, yes, please email me for anybody that you want to recruit for the next training as well. And Wani brings up some of the channels won't show up automatically. You have to join them. Correct. I did set an algorithm with the invite link so that you would be automatically added to all the channels that I just outlined. So if for some reason you have an issue joining them, just let me know, okay? Susan says, I'm all set. And then Janet says, is Google Docs good for sharing files? Yeah, I mean, I use Google Docs pretty frequently. And we will, I would say that, especially when you have a living document, for instance, our resources document, our hashtags document, etc. We're gonna, those are Google Docs. So it's up to you and how you want to share it and sort of what settings you want, if you want people to be able to comment or if you want people to be, able to just view it or edit it, it's up to you, but I support whatever you all want to use. And Christina, true, we haven't set up the new channel yet. I'm waiting for Heron to be added to Slack because they will be the ones starting up that channel as our issue area expert. So you'll see that as anti-trans rhetoric. So just stay tuned on that front. And then from Noelle, sorry if you already said this, but when we send a message to specific people in Digital Defenders DM, is that just tagging specific people, but the message is visible to everyone? No, it's just a private message. So that's where you can just chat like you are texting someone essentially. But if you put something in the channel, then yes, everyone can see it. Can groups be developed based on state participation / volunteers? We can. I would say that especially after this training, I'm seeing a lot more geographical spread in terms of where people are from. So just feel free to shoot me a DM on Slack, and then we can, if we're starting one state participatory channel, then I'd love to, replicate that. I do think a way that we could do it is even regionally, and then have specific questions underneath. River said, this is the free version of Slack, right? How often do messages age out? I'm actually not sure about that, River, just because I have one paid version and then one free version. So let me look into that, and then I'll respond on this chat. And if so, I feel like it's something like 90 days is what it was last time. Not 90 days. I think it was more like 120 days. But I'll look into that and get back to you. Q&A. All right. Does that pin appear on the app? Allison, Twitter. Okay. Just a question from Alyssa, which is figuring out how to follow hashtags on Twitter. Can you do that, or is that only for Instagram? On Twitter, I generally just put in the hashtag each time I'm doing a search. I don't think there's a There are some ways that you can like create a list maybe of, which is what I do frequently, of people that you're following that you want to monitor their exchanges on a hashtag for. But otherwise, I would really recommend sort of just monitoring that hashtag every day. That's something that I'm doing right now for some of that repro work, is that I am sort of monitoring what the engagements around the hashtag hands off my BC, which is hands off my birth control, just because it is a hashtag that has been used so frequently over the past week. So I pretty much pull that up every day to see what that level of engagement's like. And then of course on Instagram, there's a totally different level of being able to follow that, but we'll go into that in the how to engage online section. And says, does that pin appear on the app? Yes, it does. The pin appears on the app. And Anna is speaking about the little pinned information at the top of the channel. Yes, it does. And if you have a problem finding that, just let me know. But otherwise, I'll also just type in the information again so that you're able to access it right away. It's also in the About Me of the Digital Defender section. So each channel has a description. So I have the website login, etc., right on the top as well. And Anne said she found it. Excellent. All right. So do folks have other questions about Slack right now? Victoria, do you mean the questions that I'm reading out right now, or do you mean the Q&A box? What you're reading now, yeah, I can see the Q&A, but not everyone can. So that's where you can put in the questions for me, and then I'm able to see them. So folks are using a mix of the chat box and then also the Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can put it in the Q&A or you can put it in the chat box. Yesterday you could see the questions in Q&A. Are other folks having issues with that? I didn't know you could see the questions in Q&A yesterday. That's weird. Some questions you were able to see yesterday I could, today I can't. Okay. It seems like it's a little bit of a mix. You know what it is? It's because I was answering them live. So for instance, I'm going to do this with Dee right now. So that's me saying I'm answering this test question from Dee live. So that's why you should be able to see it. Are folks seeing that right now? Okay, excellent. So it's because I was dismissing them or typing the answers. All right, wonderful. Look at that teamwork and collaboration. Great. So hi, Tiana. Perfect timing. Hi. Hello.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. Welcome, welcome. We are just ending up our Slack tutorial, and then we'll be turning to you. So thanks for being punctual, and we're running very much on schedule right now. Cool. So just wanted to wrap this section up. If folks have any other questions on Slack specifically, just feel free to DM me or just write to me here on Zoom. But it seems like we're all figuring it out together and making it work. So I appreciate that. The last note that I had, I thought it was very useful yesterday when you all gave some very specific feedback on what you wanted to learn more about as we were going through the templates, as we were practicing. So I wanted to ask you if there were any specific components of the templates or lessons from yesterday that you wanted to know more about, so I can ensure that it's integrated into the rest of the training today. So feel free to just type that in the chat box. I know already that one note that I got was around really digging into reliable news sources. Catherine said, I'd love to know more about disability rights. I think that's a really important point, Catherine, and it is a part of our unity principles and part of the women's agenda. So what I can do is bring someone in who can really speak to disability rights work on the next training. And I can also share with you a webinar that the Women's March hosted on disability rights under the time of COVID specifically, that I thought was really excellent. I see a question from Ayushi, which is, would there be an end closing survey? Yes, there will be. So you'll get that via email and on Slack for you to use. Great. Disability rights for sure. All right. Well, thank you. And then I hear from Darcel, would like to get a better feel for the length of a constructive edition, either by word or character count. So some tips on, hey, you know, are we going to write an essay? Are we going to keep it short? I hear you on that front. I myself am a long writer, so I feel like that can hold me back sometimes from staying accessible too. And then Christina wants to talk a little bit more about responding to ally comments, since our two presenters had somewhat different perspectives. Christina, can you elaborate on that a little bit, just so I'm clear? I'll let you type that in the chat box, and then I'll just make sure that we cover that in the messaging section. Awesome. So Samantha, would you mind pulling up your screen again? And Atiana, I am going to unmute you. And Samantha, can you go back one slide, please? Perfect. Atiana, you are unmuted and you can get started. Awesome. So just wanted to have the intro slide up so everyone knows who you are. So thank you for joining us. I actually used you as an example on Slack since you were updating us on some movements that we're seeing around EPA rollbacks and other changes to protections that were previously issued under COVID. So for folks that are asking questions in the chat, I'll respond to them in the order they're received, so hang tight. But for the meantime, I just wanted to introduce Atiana, who is a director of gender equity and environment at the Sierra Club, and has been working with us on Digital Defenders curriculum for the past few months. And Atiana, I will let you take it away. And feel free to just say next when you want to move to the next slide.
Cool, thank you. And I have a couple screens open, so I'm trying to just like get organized. Okay, thank you, and thanks everyone for taking the time on a weekend, on a Sunday, on Mother's Day to be with this group and to learn and to really be involved in the long term. So I invite you, I don't know where you are in the break process, but definitely stretch as needed. A little bit about me is that I am actually 9 months pregnant. I'm kind of trapped in a desk right here, else I'd show you my belly. And so this Mother's Day is kind of being a parent is top of mind, as I'm just 2 weeks away from my due date, and I know that stretching and staying moving is important. So as we sit at our desks, at our computers today, I encourage you to take the time you need to stretch it out. So I am, like Nora said, a Tiana. I work at the Sierra Club, which, if you don't know, is the oldest and largest grassroots environmental organization in the country. So we've celebrated, I think, a 130-year-old organization, chapters in all 50 states and Puerto Rico, about 4 million members across chapters in all of those states. And the work that we do is largely based on advocacy to defend the environment, get folks outdoors, which we know in the current environment is that outdoor space and access to outdoor space can be incredibly grounding. And also we have a gender equity program, which is small relative to some of the other work, but really integral to making the connection, not just about how the environment is important to protect, but what is our relationship with the environment? How are women disproportionately impacted or exposed to different environmental challenges? And what can we be doing actively to make sure that that is addressed? So next slide, please. Thank you. So you'll see on the slide that there's a growing group of folks recognizing this work, including the Women's March, that climate justice is one of the 3 pillars that not only the Women's March as an organization or an institution recognized, but also based on the members themselves and the activists themselves, calling on the fact that the environment is a key part of what not only motivates us to do our advocacy, but also part of the experiences that we're facing on a daily basis. So I don't know if folks are able to read. Would somebody be able to volunteer to
Yes.
do this?
We did this with great success yesterday. So we already have a volunteer, and I am going to unmute you, Kat. So you are unmuted now.
All right, great, thank you. All right. We believe that every person, every community, and Indigenous peoples in our nation have the right to clean water, clean air, and access to and enjoyment of public lands. We believe that our environment and our climate must be protected, and that our land and natural resources cannot be exploited for corporate gain or greed, especially at the risk of public safety, health, and cultural destruction.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kat. And I think, yeah, so the justice part of this is particularly important to call out. Similar to reproductive justice or other forms of justice, we know that women of color and poor communities are disproportionately exposed and impacted by some of these environmental challenges. And so when we think about climate justice, it's not just capturing the needs of people currently, but who's most impacted, who has had a history of impacts in their communities and their neighborhoods, and what are we doing to make sure that that is addressed. And again, the COVID crisis currently, the cumulative impacts of air pollution or other particulate matter or other exposures that people are having in their built environment, in their neighborhood, living near a coal plant or living near polluted water or air, then ultimately impacts our health and our well-being. And in the current crisis, we're seeing the impacts of that firsthand as all of these stressors lay on top of one another. So a couple of resources on the left are adjustclimate.org. This is a coalition effort of a number of different organizations, big greens as they're called, like the Sierra Club or Center for American Progress, partnered with some environmental justice groups and folks working on the front lines to develop some principles. And so those principles can be seen on that website. And then the next is feministgreenNewDeal.com, a similar coalition that the Sierra Club is a part of that also put together principles, but specific to the Green New Deal and what was currently being left out of, how are we investing in paid family leave in the clean energy sector? Or, where is patriarchy and dismantling patriarchy in the larger conversation about moving towards a green economy? And what is the interplay between the fossil fuel industry and patriarchy, and trying to kind of explore that in defining principles. So those resources are available, and a petition that you can sign on to stay involved and get updates. And then the last is the People's Bailout, which is related to the COVID response in Congress specifically, and calling on some of the stimulus packages that are being invested in. What are the needs of not only the moment at hand, and making sure that, healthcare responses and our economic responses are swift and wide reaching, but what is the opportunity that this moment is giving us to stimulate a new chapter for our economy that is grounded in investments in clean energy and environmental solutions. So that the People's Bailout has over 900 organizations signed on to it right now. There's 5 principles, and then there's ongoing moments of activism. So for May Day, there was a moment of activism with the labor movement. For Earth Day, the organizations partnered with the youth movement to lift up their efforts for an Earth Day Live. And there's, again, opportunities to sign on and learn more on that website. So let's go to the next slide, please.
Samantha, you good? Back.
Oops. Yeah, we're almost there.
One more.
Sorry, the button got stuck.
No, you're fine. And I wish I had it up on my computer and I could
Okay.
know what was next, but.
There you go.
Oh, okay, awesome. So what are the challenges, and where is that kind of sweet spot of change? Is, from my understanding, what you all are being equipped to work on and move and have conversations around. And so wanted to go through a couple examples of how climate justice shows up in conversations and where those opportunities for movement are. So, and I would love to dig into the chat later. I'm not able to dig into some of these comments, but I'm excited to see people engaged. So thank you. And okay, so we have kind of this fear structure. Sounds like ineffective response and constructive addition. And I think you're familiar with this structure from previous presenters. We have, for the fear structure on the left, the first is we're going to have our personal freedoms taken away in order to save the planet. So some of the challenges that we see in making climate solutions mainstream are that people feel like they're going to take away our hamburgers and our cars, and that people are going to have to sacrifice in order to create the solutions that we want to make. I'm feeling now more than ever that people are able to make some pretty extraordinary sacrifices. For the past 2 months, our whole country has pretty much been on lockdown. That said, that's not necessarily the best response, to be like, well, you were able to make these sacrifices for a pandemic, why can't you make them now? Is not necessarily an engaging, gentle way of having that conversation. And so in fact, the most effective way is to think about that we're not asking people to take away their personal freedoms or their choices or their hamburgers, but rather that there's corporate power at play that that we need to shift the burden of responsibility from the individual to these corporate and systemic players. So for example, the fossil fuel industry received some of the bailout funds from the COVID congressional investments. And despite the fact that they also already have subsidies and also were receiving some other support that even the clean energy sector was not receiving. And so kind of being able to put a spotlight on the fact that these corporations, these institutions, these industries are getting an unfair treatment and support and being propped up in ways that are not true to their economic value is more impactful and more relevant than the conversation about cars and hamburgers. So the other example here is, I'm scared about the jobs in my community going away, and a future with a bunch of windmills and tofu is not my idea of a solution. And so that might show up with people saying, after a winter storm, yeah, and they say global warming is a real threat. Or currently in the Northeast, I'm based in Washington, D.C., we're experiencing a cold front, and it's May, and they'll be like, so global warming, huh? Despite, since we're having a cold streak right now. And the fear of job loss is real, and something that it's important to validate and understand and listen to, particularly for communities in Appalachia or other communities that have historically had coal or other fossil fuels at the center of their not only economy but identities. And so being able to sit with these conversations and listen to people, as I'm sure you've already discussed, is a critical part of really being able to understand where they're coming from. And so but instead of being dismissive of like, yeah, who wants to work at a coal plant anyway, really, listening to what that fear is and find middle ground. One of the key middle grounds that we find is around clean air and clean water for our families. Clean air and clean water, unsurprisingly, poll as the number one concerns, not just on environment, but on kind of welfare for people's families. People want to make sure that they're able to provide their kids with a safe place to play, safe water to drink that's not dirty or not going to get them sick, and clean air to breathe. And so if we're able to start with those entry points and those moments of understanding and shared values, then it's a lot easier to be able to make investments to ensure that those things are protected in the future. So let's head to the next slide.
Hey, Tiana.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a few folks bring up some questions on the chat. So I'm wondering if we can dig into some of those bigger questions before we go into the template.
Perfect. Yes.
I think something that is coming up is around corporate accountability and personal choice, right? And sort of the disproportionate focus on personal choices as an avenue for fixing this gigantic structural issue, as opposed to, I think, the teeth that one needs to really dig into corporate accountability. I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit in terms of how you see people talk about personal choices in terms of what you eat, or the kinds of materials that you choose to use, or whether you ride a bike or drive a car, as opposed to corporate accountability. Sort of like, how do you balance the conversation between those two?
I mean, and certainly we all show up the best way we know how and can, and I ride a bike because I'm able to, but for the past couple of months, I haven't been able to ride a bike because I'm pregnant and it hasn't been comfortable. And so, and just in terms of being able to appreciate different people's, not everyone can ride a bike to work. Some people are going to have to take the bus or drive a car. And so being very understanding of what those choices mean for people makes it that, it's not worth getting caught up in the guilt trips of those decisions. And really positioning, I'm trying to find a statistic about, and that ultimately has been the Republican political strategy, is to protect industry by first denying climate change, saying it isn't happening, then, saying, oh, humans aren't causing it. And, with things like, oh, have you heard of the Ice Age? And yet now more people are understanding that these things are happening. They're seeing hurricanes in their communities. They're seeing wildfires. And so that hasn't been as effective of a narrative, just the straight up denial. And so a lot of what people are doing is trying to place that to create some fear around the sacrifices we might need to take. And ultimately, that just simply isn't true. I think being able to bring it to a higher level and depict not these like choices as perceived as elite choices of, oh, you're able to drive a Prius, so you're able to make these, to shop vegan and organic, but rather that's missing the point entirely. That these corporations have framed that messaging for us and have narrowed the conversation for us, when in fact they're the ones that are responsible for the pollution to begin with, and that the situation we've gotten ourselves into. And so kind of by continuing to elevate and reframe that can be the best way of going about things. I don't know if that answered the question.
That's helpful. And Christina dropped a link to the litter myth, which I think is an NPR, was on a podcast from NPR, and talks about how there's been a history of corporate manipulation of cultural messaging about climate to make it a personal burden rather than systemic. And just agreeing that that's, sort of like the focus on the individual as opposed to the structure and the system is exactly how capitalism is meant to function, and exactly how, blame is meant to be assigned in a well-functioning capitalist society, which is what we're seeing run amok right now, right? And really put profits over people at every turn. So appreciate you sharing that perspective, Atiana. And I'll let you get back to the template.
And I'll say, I think thanks for sharing the litter myth too. The plastics industry is a perfect example. Plastic is made from fossil fuels, and it is been promoted as a way now with decreasing consumption of fossil fuels in other ways. There's already these strategies to ensure that the plastics industry remains strong, both for personal products like plastic water bottles, but also more corporate or industrial uses of plastic. And one of the most clear examples is that the plastics industry right now is working at the state level to build a campaign about fear mongering around plastic bags, and saying that bringing in your own bags is dangerous, and having plastic bags is the more sanitary and safe choice. And so they're trying to seed the ground that they'd lost by doing these campaigns in this moment of crisis. And the litter bug is the same example, where it's the phrase litter bug was invented by the industry to individualize the burden of plastics pollution rather than owning responsibility for it. So it's discouraging to know that there's minds out there that are crafting these campaigns, but on the individual level, we're really able to engage and connect with people, and that the predominant reality and preference is that people want clean air and clean water. And so hopefully with that momentum behind us, we'll be able to make the solutions we need to. So the two examples here, and would love your tactics for constructive additions. The first one is climate change is too expensive. And if you care about the climate so much, how about having less kids? This is definitely a relevant narrative that people bring up. And the way not to respond, we suggest, is to say, I don't even plan to have kids because you boomers ruined the planet. Girl, bye. So what would be if somebody says, oh, you know, you should have less kids to save the planet? What would be a good way to engage with that person? I invite you to put in the chat or take a couple minutes to brainstorm a little bit. And I see people have already been at it. So thank you.
Would it be helpful if if we waited for folks to respond to the first one and then I read them out to you?
Yeah, let's do that. And then we'll do the second one.
Awesome. Atiana, before we get deep into that, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about why that ineffective response is ineffective, like why it's almost there.
So, good question. The things that we know to be important are choice around being able to choose how and when and with whom to have a kid. And so kind of just responding negatively or in an intergenerational burden, like blaming other people, is never a good tactic. But yeah, but it also disempowers the person saying it because they feel like they don't even have a choice to have kids because of the planet. So if there's a way to
Right.
Yeah, feel like they have more of a choice.
So I'm going to read out some great responses that we're seeing. So one is from Anne, and it's climate change begins with each person looking at his life to make improvements. Instilling climate change into children at a young age is key to shaping the future. Another one that we see from Kat is there are many personal choices people can make according to their values. Climate change is too big a topic to take on solo, so it's important that we work together and demand clean air and clean water from corporations. And then from Catherine, I care about the planet and everyone's right to live with clean water and air, whether they have kids or not. And then from Victoria, it's a personal decision how many kids to have. Like you, I decided on 2. There are also many personal choices we can make, including fighting for structural change around climate. And then from Gina, there are other and more effective ways to help the climate than not having children. You might be interested in learning more about this at. So I'll pause there so we can unpack those a little bit, and then we have a few more. So what are your thoughts, Atiana, on any of those?
Yeah, that's great. And I think kind of acknowledging the fear that people have and their concern is really great. Sorry, my chat keeps like jumping back up to the top, so I was trying to follow along, but I think all of those are really great.
Yeah, I think that the one that that I loved about yours, and specifically, was around how instilling conversations around climate change or beginning to instill those values into children at a young age is key to shaping the future, just because that's not something that people learn about in all schools, and it's sort of like purposeful in terms of how public education is consistently deprioritized, and these values are sucked out from young minds and also from curriculum. So I do think that that's a really great approach. of course, thinking about personal choice that people can make according to their values. Kat, I love that you brought personal choice and values together. You know, sort of talking about how the two go hand in hand. And also the fact that you said that climate change is too big a topic to take on solo. So then just again saying that this is about working together, you know, no matter what. Again, I think Victoria, you also reiterated the personal decision and personal choices. That was really useful. I also really love Catherine Bashar. I didn't read this out because it came a little bit before I stopped, but you wrote, "I'm so sorry that you feel like you can't have kids because of the state of the climate. We can still save our planet. Individual actions can help, but it is too heavy a lift for individuals. Government and business need to do most of the lifting." I love that you did that and shifted the framework so that it was a matter of talking about personal choice, but then also bringing it back to, hey, this blame is unfairly placed on us, and these are the people that can really sort of, you know, actually shift the needle. Another one that we see from Christine is, "Ally, it can indeed be depressing to think about future for children, and it's a challenging personal choice for people to make. There are loads of effective ways of helping out the climate." I love that one, Christine, especially because you acknowledge that it's a challenge. Just what you were saying earlier, Atiana, sort of meeting people where they're at, you know, affirming them, and also letting them know that you understand and empathize with their situation, which our ally in this case did not do. And then Christina also said, "I'm glad you support the planet. Interestingly, current research, I'll send you the link when I find it, shows that the fear about population versus resources is based on an outdated model that doesn't match modern birth rates. I think that we should shift our focus to systemic issues beyond personal choices to fight climate change." And then from Noelle, "Ally, I know it can be disheartening sometimes, but more and more people are realizing that climate change is too expensive not to fix." I really like that, Noelle. You flipped the script on them and were able to use that in a really smart way. And I think that that's also something that's like got you a little bit, but not in a way that would push them away from the conversation. And from Teddy, "At Ally, there are so many challenges. I don't blame you at all. There are some powerful movements trying to work on some of them. This is an issue that affects us all." From Jasmine, I see one that says, "I hear you. It's scary how quickly the problem of climate change has expanded and how long the problem has been ignored. We need to keep in mind that 70% of CO2 is caused by just 100 companies. We need to focus on corporate responsibility as well as personal responsibility." I love, Jasmine, that you brought out that stat that isn't actually too heavy, and similar to what you did as well, Christina. Like, we're not sending people like a gigantic data report, right? But you're pulling out a stat that anybody can relate to and is easy to understand. And then Samantha wrote a really good one, which is, "Population is definitely a factor in the climate crisis, but so is the lack of solidarity in responding to the issue. We need the support of the OP, which stands for Original Poster, not their disparagement." I love that, Samantha, because I think that I agree, like the ineffective response from this ally is something that I actually see a lot, but I know somebody else brought this up in the chat. Is this even worth sort of like engaging with, right? Like, this is actually on the spectrum of like ineffective to very ineffective. This is very ineffective. So I actually think having that bite in that message is not a bad thing, especially because we know that that troll is going to be seeing this anyway, so they might be able to draw back in with your positive engagement. All right, so we have some really, really good ones here. Atiana, are there any in particular, or any sort of like content focuses or tropes that you want to bring out that you thought were helpful with this?
That's so great, and I'm so impressed that people are just able to jump in and put together some really thoughtful messaging. So I think all of these were really excellent and definitely on the right track. And there was a mention of acknowledging that the population concern is outdated in the comments, and that certainly is the case. And I think that's why it continues to show up. And so I can definitely follow up with some resources if people really find themselves in a conversation around population and climate change to further contextualize why that is not only problematic, but also kind of just outdated and not relevant to the current crisis that we're facing.
Mm-hmm. And just another note on the flipping the script, since we sort of saw that with the not the flip back, and I also see that with Sophia's comment, the cost of inaction is far greater than that of a Green New Deal. So like really sort of showing people in a very simple way, and if you have those numbers, that's great, and you had those, Sophia, in what you wrote. I don't even know how many billions or trillions that is, trillions of dollars, 500 trillion in lost economic output. I think that if you have those numbers easily, and it's something that anybody can understand, like the weight of one over the other, I think that's really fantastic, especially when talking about climate. And the last one is from River. And River, I feel like you brought up something around like the Industrial Revolution, or maybe it was actually, we were talking about the Great Depression yesterday when we were talking about jobs, and River brought up that businesses in each generation since the Industrial Revolution has contributed to the state of our climate. So please bond across generations to hold businesses to account. I love that, because that actually is sort of a clapback to, without being a clapback, to the boomers term, because we can understand that they too have been impacted by this, because they lived through seeing corporations and businesses grow and contribute to the current state of the climate. So I love that you brought that up without necessarily being aggressive or mean about it. Let's go on to the second one.
Okay, great. And I did see a couple comments about the movie, the Michael Moore movie, The Human Planet, and I will follow up with a couple contextual responses to that film that should hopefully support people. People look like they were feeling frustrated after that movie for many reasons, because some of the reality is depressing and some of the solutions were not the best that were put forward. So I can follow up with more information about that afterward. So the next one, and we have just a few minutes, is yeah, we can just jump. I think we got some good practice. Yeah, let's do the hashtags.
I agree. I think it would be useful if you just talk to us, Atiana, a little bit about not only the hashtags, but like what you're seeing conversations revolve around these days.
Yeah. So one thing that, so yeah, certainly that movie that just came out, I think the thing that inspires me most is the youth-led climate movements. So the climate strikes, Fridays for Future, obviously Greta and other youth voices, even AOC in Congress as a younger member of Congress, really stepping out and framing climate change as a really powerful and critical thing to be talking about, has brought a lot of energy to the conversation. And so definitely excited to see that. But also with that comes trolls. And so what we've also seen is that these individuals who are stepping out, particularly women, are facing some of the, bullying or discouraging comments in response to that. So just kind of continuing to elevate the conversation is part of the advice that we always suggest for people who are facing any kind of trolls in their discussions.
Mm-hmm. And then Atiana, is there anything that's coming up sort of in, like, knowing that, of course, and I know Gina brought this up when we were beginning to sort of like talk about COVID in this context, and I mentioned that People's Bailout has some really good resources on sort of the disproportionate impacts of policing and surveillance on Black communities right now, whether that's cities or rural areas. We're definitely seeing that come into play. I'm wondering if you know about anything else around legislation or the EPA or other rollbacks that we can expect to come our way?
Oh, yes. So rollbacks are kind of ongoing. One of the things COVID related is the water utility shutoffs and electricity shutoffs that communities are facing if they haven't been able to pay their bills under the current circumstances. And so there's some state level efforts to ensure that people's lights and water stay on as a kind of an immediate need. There are certainly some rollbacks, EPA rollbacks. There was obviously the big effort that it sounds like you guys spoke about on the Slack maybe last month, that where, moments of crisis are an opportunity to go backwards, unfortunately. And so, but yeah, nothing on the horizon that I can think of. I think just really hoping that this next stimulus package or whatever the next COVID money is an opportunity to invest in infrastructure, which sounds like it has some bipartisan support. And with that, hoping that the infrastructure is for renewable energy.
Mm-hmm. We have two questions. One is if you have any advice or insight into sort of the conversation around voting with your money, investing in green companies, and sort of going over state lines, especially if you're in a supportive green state, like how to get that momentum moving nationally, which I know is a big question. And then another one, which is around that climate is such a big and sometimes overwhelming issue. Like any tips or tricks on how to start talking about it with people that may not be thinking about its impacts?
Two things on the money front. One is making sure that your 401ks or any retirement funds go towards a green portfolio or a corporate socially responsible portfolio. And there's a lot of different resources out there to help select what that portfolio might be. The other is that there's a lot of efforts to ensure that banks don't fund big infrastructure projects like the Dakota Access Pipeline or drilling in the Arctic. And so bank by bank we've successfully met commitments from all the banks except for Bank of America to not fund drilling in the Arctic, which while Trump had permitted that to happen, without the funding, it's not going to happen. And so we're hopeful that that sort of advocacy to the banks can be a powerful tool. And similarly, I mean, the individual action there is to have your money at a local bank, have it at a credit union or something else that doesn't make those kinds of investments in big infrastructure projects. So, yeah, and I just encourage you, to stay involved and get informed, and I'll continue to share tools on these on the platforms that you're involved in so that you can continue to be plugged in.
Excellent. Thank you, Atiana. And I know that we will get a little bit deeper into practicing some of these later this afternoon, so keep the questions coming. But thank you, Atiana, for being here with us. And we'll stay tuned for more resources and links to share with everyone. And Atiana just put her email in the chat. Thank you for that. So folks can reach out if there's anything Atiana said that you want more information about. You can feel free to contact her directly as well. And she's on Slack too. So wishing you wealth, birth, vibe, and safety and health in these times. And I hope it warms up so you have a beautiful spring.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. All right. And thanks everybody for all that you're doing. All right. See ya.
Samantha, can you go on to the next slide, please? Awesome. This is a slide that everyone wants to see. It's a 15-minute break. So come back here at 1:30. Go get your coffee. Go call your mothers or caregivers, all of that jazz. Stretch, have some lunch, and we'll be back here at 1:30 to talk about reproductive rights, health, and justice. So I'll talk to you all soon. Bye. Feel free to stay on Zoom, but just it's probably a little bit easier than logging out. So whatever you wish.